All right, well, I'm going to kick things off. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Crowley. I'm from eQuo, and I wanted to thank you all for joining us today for our exclusive webinar, Unlocking the Power of AI for Your CPG Brand. This is a practical webinar for our CPG founders, and we're thrilled to have you here today. And we're hoping by the end of today's session, you're going to have a whole bunch of practical insights into how AI can help you to transform your business and give you a significant edge in the competitive CPG market. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to dive into today, and then we'll dive right in. So we're going to empower each of you to understand the basics of AI, and then we're going to dive into the practical applications and implementation strategies through real world case studies. And then we'll open up the floor to questions. So while your larger questions can be addressed at the end, if you want to dive deeper into what our panelists are discussing at the moment, just raise your hand and we'll invite you in to ask your questions. So with that, I'm going to do I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that we are all gathering virtually on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect the rich histories, cultures, and traditions of Indigenous communities, and we also recognize the important work that they continue to do, and we're committed to learning from and supporting Indigenous voices and efforts. So let's dive right in. First of all, I'm going to introduce Barry Hillier. If you don't know him, he's the founder and CEO of eQuo, as well as a partner at Cabanish and AutoAgentic. And if you don't know him already, he's a serial entrepreneur who really understands that building a successful business is never a straight line. With experience across industries like advertising, SaaS, CPG, automotive, retail, banking, and e-commerce, Barry helps founders to navigate the challenges of building a successful business. And he's here to share the strategies that have helped him inspire, ideate, build, and disrupt. And we're looking forward to hearing his insights today. And we also have the amazing tech wizardry of Michael Carrick here today, who is the CEO and founder of XDS Experience Design Systems, and amongst others, a founding partner at both Agentic and Cabanish. Mike has made it his mission to elevate designers from being just pixel pushers to strategic business partners. And he helps companies frame problems, validate concepts, and deliver exceptional user experiences that meet the needs of people, businesses, and technology. Michael, or Mike, believes that we can design a future that propels us forward. And I'm certainly excited to see how his passion and expertise are going to help guide us in our AI journeys today. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We'll dive right in. And Mike, I'm going to have you start us off by introducing us to AI. What is it in simple terms, and how is it really different from just automation?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the really kind words. And what I'll do is I'll walk you through a couple of slides that I think are really important to get people caught up on what is AI. Really, where I want to start is a little bit in the history. So the type of AI that we're working with is very specific to a technology called transformers. I'm not going to stay too technical. I'm going to keep it pretty high level, but it's important to know before that there have been machine learning and all these other different strategies of AI. It's not new. The concepts have been around for decades, but literally in 2017, this new strategy or paper was released on transformers, which started to produce the AIs that we're looking at today in terms of ChatGPT or Claude, et cetera. So it's important to know that this is still relatively new in terms of its capabilities. But looking from 2017, not long after that paper was released and the ideation around transformers existed, Google came out with BERT, which honestly was a bit of a fail on their behalf. But again, it was a first kind of draft on that. Not long after, OpenAI came out with GPT-2, which nobody really heard about because it was still early 2019. But really what started to happen was in the launch of 2020, GPT-3, and then in 2022, DALL-E, where people started to see images getting created by AI. Most people didn't really come into the idea of AI until about 2022, which is where Anthropic and GPT kind of came out with their 3.5. And that was the real uptick in about November of 2022. So when you get a sense on where AI really started to hit the ground running was around here where people started to see it in the news. Adoption, I think, was about 1 million people had adopted GPT or tested GPT in a month. It is exponential in terms of its use cases. But that's really where people started to see this new opportunity around AI. And then since then, what's really interesting is the cadence. So again, a few years between major milestones, but now we're seeing milestones every 3 to 6 months where there's big releases between Google, who's now entered in with Gemini with this big 2 million context window. We'll explain that. But then you've got Anthropic, you've got OpenAI, you've got open source versions, you've got mini versions that you can run on your own computer, and it's really just blown up and it's taken on multimodals, which means that it can deal with text, which we're obviously going to talk a lot about, but it can now deal with images, it can now deal with audio, it can now deal with video. So now it can take in all this different media types, which is really showing its expansion. So as it learns from different media types, it's now able to create different media types. And this is, again, very recent in terms of some of their capabilities, but really showing that this is an upward curve going like, I guess the screen goes like this for you guys, but showing that it's exponentially increasing at phenomenal speeds. So it's a really good time to take a step back and realize that this isn't new in terms of the idea of AI and machine learning. Have been around for quite a bit of time, but really in the last 3 to 4 years, it has really transformed the way we're working with these new technologies. So what is AI? Simple definition, AI is there to simulate human thinking and intelligence. It's not human thinking and intelligence, it's there to simulate it, which is, I think, a big difference of what people sometimes think. How does it work? Don't worry about reading the text. I'll walk you through it really easily. There's three major components to it. One is the fact that you have what's called an LLM, which is a large language model, which is based on these transformers. So the best way that I've heard it explained to me was um, think of it as you have the internet of data. And if you want to put that on a USB stick, it's never going to happen. So what a transformer is it understands the relationship between elements. So it's predictive. If I say the word Albert, it's going to run through a whole bunch of last names because it knows the first Albert is a first name, and it's going to start running through a bunch of last names that it thinks is the most correct one. So it's going to predict 100 different last names. I'm going to then write Einstein, or I'm going to write the letter E. It's going to go, okay, this person's talking about Albert Einstein because it knows the relationship between these two words. And then once it knows Albert Einstein, it also has an understanding of all the things that correlate around that human being, events, etc. So when I write date of birth, it knows the correlation of those words. It's not that it has a data element that says Albert Einstein was born in this year. It's that there's a relationship that it understands between the words Albert, Einstein, year, and birth. And that power of connection of words allows it to predict the year that he was born because it's a relationship that the data understands, not the actual data itself. When you elevate that, it's then about it understands concepts, it understands events, and it understands those relationships. So I'm going to really simplify this for you. You're a chef. You've read a ton of books about cooking. You know every ingredient imaginable. You know how these ingredients work together. You know how they don't work together. So when someone says, make me a dish, they might ask a few questions on what you like and what your personal taste preference are. But the fact that the chef knows all this stuff intuitively comes from the training of understanding the relationship between all of the elements it knows, whether that's the kitchen or whether that's the ingredients. It's that bed of knowledge. It's not that each of these pieces of data exist and it knows every single recipe in the world. But if you asked it to cook up a great pasta meal or add some protein to that, it would have a really good idea of what to predict would be the right ones to use because it has experience. It understands the connection between all of these different objects. So that's really what an LLM does. It's not about the data itself. It's about understanding the network of data elements and their relationships. So hopefully that does help a fair bit in terms of the concept. Now, there are a few pieces to know. Some people are like, I have AI, and it isn't. It's probably using an AI source like OpenAI, which are these large language models. So when you see a lot of products out there using AI, they're simply creating a GUI or a front end, and then they're going through and passing content to those LLMs to get back information. So the LLM is part of that conversation. And there are three major ones, and then some people have done self-hosting ones where they can then customize it. The other one is modality. And modality is really about the different types of communication. So again, text, video, and images. And the third part is around customization. So this is where you get into, I have an LLM, but I'm going to now create a prompt, some content, but I'm going to give it data that I want it to know. So I'm going to upload a template. I'm going to say, I'm going to give it context. Here is a data set of car inventories. All of that's going to help it when it starts to send that information to the LLM, because the more words you give it, the better it understands those associations and topics. Hopefully that helps a lot. It gives a general sense on what AI is and some of the underlining parts of what develop a lot of these AI agents.
That's great, Mike. Thanks. So just to kind of summarize, particularly on that last screen that you had, the language model is kind of the base.
Mhm.
It can then output the text or the video or the audio that you're speaking of based on the information you feed into it. It has knowledge on its own, but the more you feed into it or train it, the more customizable and useful it will be for you personally. Is that accurate?
100%. So the way I like to tell people who use GPT is you can use GPT. A lot of people jump into it and use it like Google. They ask it like a search query or something like that, and the results are pretty basic. But if I need a recipe and I say, "Hey GPT, can you act like an Italian chef and help me find a recipe of X?" You've given it a persona. So all of a sudden, instead of it having this massive amount of information and knowledge, you've now kind of said, "I want you to really focus your knowledge on Italian cooking." Right? And by focusing those LLMs on a smaller bit of content and strategy, your output's going to be 10 times better because it's not trying to answer with the idea of everything in mind. It's trying to answer based on a character, right? Which is where you get into agents down the road. So again, the more context you give an AI, it's kind of like quality in, quality out. The more you give it, the better the output's going to be.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, but before we kind of dive into the idea of IA adoption, I know we kind of touched the surface on it. What foundational steps should CPG brands take to get their operations IA or AI ready?
I think a lot of that is around first starting to play with it every day because a lot of people look at it as I need a reason to use AI. And the more reasons you're going to get by using it every day. Like I use ChatGPT quite a bit now. I use our own platform, Agentive, and I'll walk you through some of its capabilities. But it was random things that I started to use it for. I wanted to make a martini. So I said, this is the ingredients I have. Help me make a martini. It was faster and better than Google. I had a plant in my backyard that looked like poison ivy. I took a picture of it and I said, is this poison ivy? It was like commonly considered poison ivy. This is English ivy. I argued with GPT for about 5 minutes because I was pretty sure it's poison ivy, but it was right. So you start to think of it as this ability where all of a sudden it can take pictures. So it understands imagery. I can talk to it. I can text it. I use it to help check my daughter's physics homework because let's be honest, grade 11 physics is far past me at this point. But the more you use it every day in ways that you would use any sort of digital product, the more you're going to see opportunities on how you can use it in your work-life balance and how to find efficiencies in your business.
That's
I think
awesome.
one of the things that I'd like to add to this is going back to what Mike's saying. I've been involved in tech since '98, and in the similar way, what I liked about how Mike laid all of this out, the internet was around a lot longer before we started using it. It was 1995 when that became more publicly available. That was the equivalent of November 2022. The difference though is the changes between 1995 and 2010. We're going to see that in 3 years. So the later that people become comfortable in using AI, the harder it's going to be to jump in. And so I think one of the key things to really build on what Mike's saying is use it every day and use it differently because Mike and I have had a lot of really deep conversations on how to use AI. And from a CPG standpoint, the reason why we wanted to put this together for eQuo is I'm really seeing where you've got the big, generally speaking, five major CPG companies. Well, we're none of them. We all potentially could become $100 million pieces of business, but even at that level, it's nothing compared to the top five, the Unilevers, the P&Gs, the Crafts of the world. But You take a look at all of these CPG companies where we haven't been able to compete in the past because we don't have the staff, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the expertise. AI can fill in a lot of those gaps. So, in the same way that we're going to see this rapid transformation societally, that transformation is also going to allow businesses like CPG to thrive, and where AI may cut a lot of careers down. I mean, which you hate to say, it's also going to create entirely new careers. What it will do for CPG is AI is not going to replace coffee. It's not going to replace tea. It's not going to replace those commodities. What it can do, though, is it can give founders and those CPG companies the advantage of growing faster and being able to do a lot more with a lot less money and resources. So the sooner that founders start to understand it, the sooner that they can directly benefit from that within their own business.
That's great, Barry.
100%.
So with that, let's kind of get into the weeds in and around CPG brands, and specifically, maybe we can start with, how can AI help or transform the process of product development for CPG companies?
Amazing. Let me get into a bit of a demo here, which I think will be hopefully eye-opening for a few people. So I'm going to use Agentive. This is a platform that we've developed, and it's called multimodal. So we use a bit of Gemini, we use a bit of Claude, we use a bit of OpenAI, depending on what pairs best to what an agent is. And an agent, in our case, is an expert, right? We've done interviews with these experts. We've augmented them with these really large prompts that basically says, I'm an expert. Here's the books I've read. Here's the knowledge I know, and all the rest of it, which really makes them amazing at what they do. So we have, I think, 80 agents that are public, 109 for me to play with. But I'm going to walk you through one of my favorites, which is Abby. She's a generalist. She's really amazing. But she has all of these additional plugins. And what the plugins allow her to do is go out and do things that are a little unexpected. So I'm going to
So
grab a
Mike,
prompt here.
before you go further into this,
Yep.
just for context for the audience, I just want to make sure that they understand this is not your general Agentive is not your general chat GPT. This is a custom designed LLM that has already been given a lot of that information that we talked about earlier, having to feed into the system. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not a custom LLM. We use the main top three LLMs, but it is a custom wrapper that augments everything I write before it sends it to the LLM. There's an expert being attached to that message that's going to GPT, or it's going through to Gemini. So it has more context than just the things I'm writing. It has an expert that's kind of helping to be that middleman or middle person anyway, between the conversation. So in this case, I'm going to say, this is a demo. I want to create a recipe for a non-alcoholic drink. And I want to build out a creative brief, logo, packaging, website, lifestyle photography. And the nice thing is, Avi knows the other agents, so she can help me bring in agents when it makes sense, to help kind of move forward with this task. So she's happy to help, which is amazing. She said, first, we need to think about recipes. Then we can talk about the creative brief. Then we get into logos, websites, and everything. Um, it basically confirms that it understands my intention with a lot more detail than I originally gave it. So I can say proceed.
And while this is going, one of the things that I'd say is this approach can be used, not necessarily with the same results, and obviously some things, but whether you're using chat, et cetera, the key is going back to Mike's point. Try all of these because the more that you understand multiple different AI options, the more comfortable you're going to get.
I'm just going to tweak my query a little bit because right now Abby just started to answer questions, all the questions, and I want her to focus a little bit more on specific agents.
And a reminder
So
to
there
the
we go.
audience, if you have questions as we're going through this, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that we answer them.
So here it's saying to do some brainstorming with Ada. So now I can call in Ada, uh, who is a brainstorming helper. Perfect. Um, Help me come up with ideas for a non-alcoholic and always be polite to agents. they actually oddly do better. And part of it is, again, it goes back to, it sounds crazy. You're like, oh my gosh, how does an agent realize you're being polite? But I use the word please, right? And please then has an association with other kind words. So when I send it through, there's a certain amount of kindness that comes back to me because there's a word association, right? So it's not magic. I mean, it's impressive, but it's not magic. When you actually be polite, they're more polite back because, again, you're providing word associations to them and then they get information back. So loves using emojis, which is awesome. We can look at Mia, we can look at like these different areas and say, okay, these are fantastic things we want to get into. I want to create an old-fashioned drink that is non-alcoholic and has health benefits. Can you create a recipe?
Now, one of the things that's neat about this direction is we've tried this with Cabanish. It can create not only non-alcoholic drinks for us, but we can then use this for Instagram content. We can use this for blogs. There's so many different areas that we can really push on this.
Right. So now we've got a drink with a little bit of maple syrup, non-alcoholic spirits, couple of dashes of bitters, non-alcoholic, cold brew coffee concentrate. So it's starting to come up with recipe ideas that I never would have thought about because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm learning here. So when we start to say, okay, this is amazing. And again, you can use this as a way to just ideate. And this is an amazing thing that people don't use AI for. I'm going to ask it to come up with ideas. Let it be creative and come up with new things for me to test and whatnot. And then I can say, hey, I like this, I don't like this, or I'd love to substitute this. Can you substitute? What would I substitute it with? Because you have to think about it. It knows, like a chef, all the different pairings of all the different ingredients and actually can get quite good at recommendations. So I'm going to go with this one. Let's go on to a creative brief. What agentive agent should we use? Oh, I love demos when things don't render. It's okay. I did this the other day, so I can always go through and just show you guys. So we have Eden, who's the creative brief writer. So again, this is kind of, she gives me an overview. So I simply take out the original ideation. I then agent, I then add Eden to the mix and say, hey, please review the above for context and build a creative brief. Let me know if you have any questions. Now, it's important that last part. Let me know if you have questions. If you don't ask agents or AI, and this could be GPT, it doesn't have to be agentic, to ask questions, you're going to miss out on opportunities. So they're very inquisitive. And when they ask about specific topics like we're focusing on, it's going to come up and say, okay, what are the key brand values? What are the specific design elements of your style? Do you know of any of your competitors? Things I might not necessarily think about if I'm, again, let's say I am a mixologist, so I know the drink part, but I don't know the business and I don't know how to start a company and all these other parts. It can take on those personas and then ask really good questions to be like, hey, I wouldn't have thought to look at my competitors, or that's a fantastic idea. I really don't know what my brand value is. So let's explore that, right? One of the tricks I use is this is a demo. Please make up the answers and continue with creating the creative brief. So AI is also really good at making up answers. And sometimes these answers will actually be the perfect answers and you don't have to worry about it. So often you can say, okay, help me create this thing and then have it come up with answers and then let it kind of move forward. In this case, what Eden's doing is she's got a PDF creator as a plugin, which allows her to go out and actually create a document for my creative brief, which is then something I can upload to the next agent to say, hey, I want to create a logo. I want to create an X. And all of a sudden I've got artifacts that I can start copying and pasting or downloading in this case from my agent, which are going to make me be able to work with other agents or my next step with a bit of a foundation. So if you can imagine here, we've done some ideation. I could have a group of recipes and have that in a PDF. We create a brief. I can now have that. I can use that to create a tone of voice. There we go. Creative brief covers all essential elements, including competitive analysis, market assumptions. Let's hope it loads. There you go. Creative brief for the new fashioned rather than the old fashioned, which is quite clever. I don't think I would have come up with that as easily as it did. Health conscious adults, cocktail enthusiasts are seeking sophisticated non-alcoholic drink alternatives to a classic cocktail that offers the same ritual and complexity without the alcoholic content. Again, I think we've spent 3 minutes so far. What's the goal? Fantastic target audience, target persona. Is Alex mindful, 32-year-old urban professional, health conscious, and a social butterfly. Goes into his personality, values, and goals, insights, expected outcomes, messages, support. What's the call to action for this? What's the competition look like? What channels should I use? Instagram, Facebook, partnerships, a high level tone of voice, some of the deliverables I should be looking at for social content and logos, some design principles, which are very useful, and some personalization options. So now I can download that file, save, and I can either continue with this conversation, but in what I want to do now is we'll do a new conversation, and I want to create a logo for this company. So I'm going to go to our logo generator, chat
Mike,
now.
before you launch the logo generator, Randy's got a question. He's asking,
Please.
am I right in assuming as AI becomes a more common tool out there, that more and more advertisers will take their creative in-house? And that could be a question for either of you.
I think businesses will, honestly, because again, they can have a bit more control with still having scalability. So a lot of companies reach out to agencies for support because of lack of scale inside or lack of expertise. A really good example, and I think it's a really good question. I'm going to stop this for 2 seconds. I'll share it back, but I think this is an important piece when you look at AI. So for Agentive, I actually take on the legal services and cybersecurity for Agentive. I am not a lawyer, and that's important to know. I play one on TV apparently, but we have a legal agent that we've had lawyers help create and curate its expertise. I then can upload SOWs and MSAs and contracts and NDAs and all this stuff. And I can say, hey, break this down for me, the person who doesn't understand legal, and let's go clause by clause. And you can explain the intent, you can explain the benefit. And then as a supplier, can you help me explain the risks? Like, what are the things that I'm taking on that I want to be aware of? And it does a really good job of just breaking it down into pieces. Then what I can say is, hey, can you help me edit this contract in a way that's more mutually beneficial or helps augment some of my risks? And it can really help me redline or create intentional revisions to some of these contracts. Again, caveat, I then send this to my lawyer. With the AI commentary to say, hey, can you review this? I've read through the contract personally, verbatim. I had my AI review it. Together, we came up with these risks that we're not comfortable with and some ideas on how we want to mitigate those risks. I can tell you, I've brought down my legal fees by about 80%. Now, it's not necessarily saying I don't need a lawyer. I do. I still want a professional because I'm not the professional. I'm the professional on user experience and UX and research. But in this case, I can still increase my knowledge in terms of understanding contract law. I can now read a lot better as it pertains to reading through contracts and understand things without AI, which is amazing. I've educated myself. But in the end, it's augmented now with a lawyer who's now giving me 20% of their time, letting them scale, but while training me to be better. So when you think about it, some companies will be that invested in using AI to learn and to be able to provide more skills than they natively have. Others might still outsource. And there are people who will outsource now only to agencies that use AI because they want to see that efficiency and cost reduction. So there's lots of considerations on how teams will approach it internally, as well as how they work with agencies in the future. But great
And
question, Barry. Anything to add?
yeah, I'm a big yes and, as everybody who's ever worked with me knows. I'm gonna say yes to everything Mike said, and I'm gonna take a different approach. Most CPG companies under 10 million are not hiring designer ad companies anyway. And in fact, quite frankly, I'd say a lot that are 30 to 50 million, which is going to be the vast majority of a lot of the established companies that are out there aren't as well. So what
Oh,
this is doing, and building off of what Mike is saying, is this is allowing companies to have access to resources that can actually do a solid job and give you an edge further faster without having the resources or those people available to you. And so when you've got a CPG company that can go through and get a lot of this work done because they can't afford a social media manager, but now they can go through and create social media content, get images, and have it build from their own product. Not only is that helping on the marketing side, but obviously that's helping on the resource side, that they're able to have 1 + 1 = 10 in their day instead of actually being crushed because they either don't have the knowledge, they don't have the money, or they simply don't have the time to be able to do all of the many, many, many things that they wish they could do.
and
Couldn't
then
agree
to
more.
Mike's point, you still may, at the end of the day, with all of that information, you still may want to go seek out an expert to whether it's validate or to
Yeah.
perfect what you've put together. But in essence, you cut down the amount of work that expert will have to do, which saves you money, and you've educated yourself on the other side. So to your point earlier, Barry, it's not necessarily taking jobs away. It's empowering existing employees to be better, faster, stronger.
It's I go back. I'm the perfect example. I went through university for business communications, and I wanted to get into advertising. And the majority of my career since 1998 was doing jobs that didn't even exist in 1995. UI, UX, SaaS, all of these things. And similarly, yes, the future of jobs as we know it aren't going to be there, but there's going to be a whole new host of jobs. The key, though, here is AI is accessible to absolutely everybody. And I know for me, for instance, and we'll talk more as we go through, what I've been able to use AI to help me to do, for instance, with Cabanish, we were out contacting bankers. So I'll put a really clear idea. I downloaded all of our data in terms of sales from Shopify historically. I took a forecast that I'd put together, as well as our business plan. I uploaded all of those documents and I said, here's what we're doing moving forward. Can you create a story for us to present to banks and funders? And I'm telling you, here's all the insights. Here's where they're gaining traction. Here's where the investments have been made. Here's why we think this future is real. And it narrated the entire story in literally 10 minutes for us to then massage. But I'm telling you, I couldn't have done that in a week.
Couldn't agree more. Again, you just start to think about it before you think about how to complete any task. You start with your problem or the challenge you have, and you start to change the way you think. The way you say currently go to Google and say, "Hey, I don't know something," so I Google it. Now you start to say, "Well, I need to do this thing. Can AI help me?" Right? And odds are, if it can't help you, it'll still point you in the right direction. I knew a lady who was trying to set up a kitchen for her company, and I said, "Do you know what you're doing?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Amazing. Have you talked to GPT yet?" She was like, "I could." I'm like, "Well, again, let's assume it does and give it the context. I'm in Canada, or I'm in Ontario. Here are my law, like understand my legal requirements around setting up a kitchen. This is this type of stuff I want to make. Like, what are the considerations?" Even as someone, as if you were having a conversation with an expert that you can just have over the phone, look at GPT that way. Like, it's someone that you can talk to, ask great questions. You can't ask dumb questions, and it's going to give you an insight or direction. Now, the key there is to understand when to take it as an expert and verbatim versus when to do augmented research, like check your sources, double check your math, all that great stuff. It still hallucinates a bit, but that hallucination has heavily gone down from what people now think.
Can
Oh, it
you
always
explain what that
hallucinates.
term is, Mike? Because most
Oh,
people don't know.
okay. No problem. So hallucinations when AI makes things up. And it does, which is fine. The key is understanding to double check everything to make sure that the stuff it's providing, because again, it doesn't know most recent news, right? Like when you look at GPT, it's been trained on the internet, right? And they're trying to catch it up. So I think the last update, it should know everything within the last year. It has plugins now to get access to newer stuff, but it knows a lot. So do your research, do your work with it, but then double check your homework like everybody else, I tell. So I'm just going to continue unless there's another question to get into.
No, bring it on.
Perfect. So I've got Johnny. He's my logo generator. I've uploaded the creative brief that Adine helped us to create, and I can say, please help create 3 logo concepts based on the attached uh, creative brief. Let me know if you need any more information. Okay, it's always good to say, do you need more than what I'm giving you? Because then usually it's going to ask you something. Um, image description prompts, prompt strategies. For the new fashion, it's starting to come up with some ideas around that. Reimagining the cocktail drinks. It's coming up with its 3rd creative idea. And now it's asking, can it create the logos? Yes, please proceed. Now this is always, we'll see what we get. It's going to run its plugin. And the thing here is to say it's not going to, I'm a designer. So it's not essentially saying I'm going to replace designers. But if I can think about it as a brainstorming idea, or you know what, I need to go from a blank page to 80% there. This is where AI can come in and it can say, hey, here's some concepts you might not have thought about. And you can upload mood boards and you can upload additional imagery for it to take in context as it starts to build these up to say, hey, here's some things I like and here are some colors I like. But in the end, I saw your eyes open really wide, Jen. It's not bad, eh?
It's
That's
not a
not
bad
bad.
logo.
It's
It's
not
not
bad.
bad.
Not a fan of the typography personally because I'm a type
Yeah.
person, but again, love the use of a crystal glass, love the use of the orange, which inspires by the old fashioned, love the
Yeah.
little drop of blue. I might change that more into a droplet. Again, might play with the typography, but it pulled all the colors and ideas from the creative brief that it got, saying, okay, if old fashions are really my essential goalpost, well, that's fine. Little orange slices with a curl and then does the
The one thing that I find interesting and somebody, because I ran an agency for a long time, so it's funny because I'm very empathetic on the account side, on the strategy side, on the creative side, with seeing what this technology can do. But equally, I look at it right now from the entrepreneur side and the corporate side, and I think for companies to have access to this who can't afford to bring in all of these people, this is massive because what you or I may play with and elevate, it's almost unattainable or unaffordable for so many companies. So again, I go back to the opportunity of how you're going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less, but to do it in a way that actually has real strength and conviction and meaning because of the training and everything. Don't love the 3rd one, but 2 out of 3, not bad.
2 out of 3, not bad. My favorite's the first one. And what you can do with some of these engines, this uses Flux as the backend to create all the imagery, is you can fine tune it. You can say, hey, like I like number 1. Can you create 3 concepts similar to number 1? And they can break it down and break it down further. But the idea here is I can use some agents to create common content that I would need, creative briefs, tone of voice, content strategies, which I've created for clients. I'm not a writer. I'm a horrible writer. Barry can attest to this. I can't spell on my best day of the week. But
You're an art
what
director.
I
That's every art director I've ever worked with.
100%. But what I have done is I've helped companies and I'm transparent. I'm using an agent. I'm like, let me create a content strategy. And then I go to my content strategist agent. And I'm like, what do I need to create a content strategy? And it's like, you need answers to all these questions. I'm like, okay, maybe agents can help me answer those. Maybe I have to do more research. Maybe I have to review the business, all those things that help me. But then all of a sudden I have a content strategy. Well, then I can use that to create creative briefs, or I can use that to create tone of voice, all these documentation
Or a
libraries that
business plan. Like
or
let's
a
not
business
even
plan.
even on the base side, the amount of CPG companies and entrepreneurs that I talk to who don't have a business plan, you can now start to upload all of these things, all of the info. And here's a trick too for everybody. We all have recording devices. Just talk. Like honestly, just talk in and just record you telling your story. Then take the transcript, upload it, and say, here's my business. please help me create a business plan. So there's the business side and the creative side equally, and how all of these can fit together to help you.
Amazing. Again, it can go in so many different directions. I'm just showing you the creative process of ideation from a drink and recipes, and then going to my bar and creating those things and thinking about what do I like, to helping me come up with my creative brief to help me understand what I would need if I need to get a designer to create the logo, or to this point, use AI to help create that logo, because now I can use that as a prompt to kind of push that forward. And then similarly, I can say, well, now we've got the creative brief, we've got a logo and a bit of a color palette. Can you help me create a website? And it just shows all the potential opportunities. Love it when things don't work. 3, 4.
I
Okay,
think it
let's
was
see if it
one.
runs the next one.
Oh.
No, it was one that I asked it to, but number 4 was supposed to be the first website design. So we'll see if it does the fourth one. Again, somehow that didn't load. Gotta love technology. But again, I'm not saying, there you go. So it comes out with this beautiful like look and feel of a design. This isn't the website, right? But it gives me ideas and perspectives, and I can play with it and I can iterate with it. And all of a sudden I have a starting point. If I went to a designer or a web designer and said, hey, here's my creative brief, here's my tone of voice, here's my content, here's my site architecture, which this can create. Here's some styles of the sites that I started to look at that I like. Can you help me execute this? And then that's really where you're spending a lot less money going back and forth, doing iterations, doing conceptual rounds. You've done 80% of the work to say, hey, I just need you to finish this because I've worked really hard to develop all this great content. And we've spent all of about 10 minutes doing it.
And it could code it if you wanted to as well.
The code is getting better. Claude 3.5 just came out, and its code's supposed to be pretty darn good. Yeah, it's definitely getting there. It will be within, I'm going to say, a relatively short period of time. I should show you some video stuff later, but when you think about it, it's not going to be far off to say, hey, create some code. And there's lots of external applications that are going to be doing that for you. But all the stuff you're going to use to create the content is going to help it create a better website. It's going to, and then you can have an SEO agent say, hey, review my site and help tweak this for localized SEO. And it can do that. Like I said, we have over 80 agents in this, and that's just a drop in the bucket from all the roles that you think you need. The one thing I would say is when you work with agents or you work with GPT is separate things out. If you ask it to solve something from a 5,000-foot view, you're going to get a 5,000-foot view answer. If you start to break it down into smaller chunks and say, hey, I need help creating a strategy. Can you act like a strategist and help me create the strategy? Great. I need you to act like a writer. Now I need you to create content based on the strategy. Okay. So the further down you can refine who you want to work with, and the more you can break down those rules, the higher quality of output you're going to have, because again, it's not answering things from a 5,000-foot view. It's now answering them from a 500-foot view.
Well, I'd like to build off that because this is a trick that Mike taught me, and I use it all the time now. When you sit down and you say, "This is where I want to get to, but I don't know how to get there. Can you help me through this?" You literally ask it to walk you through all the steps. What are all the things I should be considering? How should I go about approaching this problem? What are the considerations that I haven't factored in? And it literally is going to work with you and help you organize all of this. So whether it's from a business plan, whether it's product creation, whether it's creating a marketing plan, and then you can start to then upload each of those individual components and then say, based on all of these inputs, I'm now looking at creating a retail strategy in terms of how to get connected to these types of stores. How would you help me build that out? And all of these things now start to provide not just answers, but you start to learn the direction. And I'll go back to the kitchen idea. We literally, in a founder circle meeting for eQuo, went through and said, what are all the considerations in creating a professional kitchen for a CPG company? And it literally went through all of the steps and all the things that you should do.
Awesome. Well, I'm mindful of time. We've got about 45 minutes left. I know we were going to kind of get into some a bit more practical case study applications, so we and whatnot. But is there anything else either of you wanted to cover off specific to CPG, whether it's design and packaging, customer engagement, competitive analysis, any of those things you wanted to touch on before we dove into the or dive into the case study?
I don't care what your problem is. I can guarantee you that a starting point for any issue, you could jump in and use, whether it's chat, whether it's agentive. The other day, like Mike and I work really closely from a creative standpoint together. And I had a photo that I needed the background image removed, and really found this thing called Photor, FOTOR.com. And literally, I just uploaded it and it completely removed the background. And I was able to respond within minutes without having to bug Mike, because I'm not particularly proficient in Photoshop. So, literally, just Googling, how can AI help me with this issue? You're going to find tools specifically designed that are easy to use, or jumping into chat and asking questions. You're going to find really quick solutions. So I just would prioritize how you think about AI in your day-to-day business, because immediately you are going to be shocked at how much you can do.
So, and adding on top of that, there was a question in the Q&A around pink elephant roller skating video. So while video is relatively new, Sora came out a little bit earlier this year. We don't have a video modality to Agentive yet as we start to look through its capabilities. I did want to show you that, with just typing in your prompt, this agent said, okay, all of a sudden it knew that we were going to do a cheerful, chubby elephant balancing on silver roller skates set against a vibrant city background. The elephant wears playful expression with big eyes and wide open joyful smile. Large ears flapping in the breeze, adding a sense of movement. This elephant is adorned with a small, colorful party that perched between its ears. So again, you can ask it to do a little and then say, hey, expand on my idea. So I took a very small prompt and say, hey, blow this up and show me something different, or expand on this. And all of a sudden my 10-word prompt, which we get you again, quality in, quality out. But if you ask it to do a step in between and augment it and say, hey, how can I make this prompt even better? Boom. And then it can do this. And then all of a sudden you've got something quite entertaining to play with. So just wanted to show you, even though it's not a video, I can show you some video stuff later, but it is pretty impressive what it can do. Integrated into this system that I'm showing you right now. Like if you look at Adobe Max just launched, I can show you examples later on if we have time or capacity in the call. Video is very much here. It's just not quite in the public hand verbatim, because it is expensive to run, is probably the best way to put it.
Fair enough. All right, so let's see how you guys have leveraged AI to create this awesome Cavenish business and accelerate your growth in the CPG space.
Mike, do you want to
Sure.
give a quick start, or do you want me to kind of jump in?
I'll let you jump in on the business side. I can talk a little bit to content creation and whatnot. But yeah, there's lots of examples of how we've used AI.
Yeah, give me a second. Maybe just if you chat about some of the stuff, I'm looking for the one specific. I guess I'll actually share with you guys some of the real results of some of the stuff that I had used. Um,
So
or
maybe we'll
actually,
rate. Okay.
oh, you know what? That's why I was looking at auto agentic. I'm like, why can't I find it? That was why. Give me a sec here.
While Barry's doing that, Mike, do you want to talk about briefly maybe about fractional support from an AI perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of goes back to the legal example that we were providing, but it just says the role if you're a team of one or a team of three, or like Cavenish, we're a founding of five, it still doesn't give us every role that a CPG company needs to be successful. So when you look at using AI, it's really to help the team learn things that they don't already know. So again, if we were getting into distribution, I could do a lot of research with generative AI on distribution. There are tools like Perplexity and Exa, which are phenomenal AI search engines which I actually used recently for Cavendish to help find services that on Google would have been on page 5 because the SEO is so bad. But because these engines look at things a little bit differently, like Exa is a neural search. So it takes the word you're looking for and then looks for things associated to that. So if I said, hey, I'm looking for something like a Canadian Tire, it's not going to show you Canadian Tire. It's going to show you associations of those without looking at SEO of the word Canadian Tire. So again, good tools. Exa and Perplexity are amazing for search, but it's an example of learning where I can say, hey, go find me other companies, go do a competitive analysis, go find who's the best person I should work for in coffee packaging. And it will give you really good results in terms of who to talk to. And then say, hey, if I was going to do a coffee package design, what are some of the things I need to think about? Like what needs to be on a package? What are the requirements? Oh, well, you need nutrition values, you need certifications, you need to have French and English if you plan to sell in Quebec. All things that honestly, I didn't know all of them when I was designing our packaging, but it's a great opportunity to say, hey, I don't know a lot. So whatever it's going to provide me is going to make me go from a 0 to a 6 or a 7 out of 10, knowing still I want to rely on those experts to say, hey, I did some package design. And instead of them saying, oh, here are all the things you need to think about that you didn't think about, they're going to be like, oh, wow, you're really close. Here's a few things that you might want to consider. And again, it gets you 80% of the way there. So regardless of the role or the task in CPG, there is an opportunity for AI to help you get closer to what someone in the end is going to need.
One of the things that I can share, because it's very interesting. I did some pretty extensive budget and forecasting, and all I did was I literally uploaded my forecast, and just basically was asking for it to help provide a detailed review, and it literally would start to walk through and started to organize, revenues, cash flow availability, operating expenses, equity value projections, et cetera. And then how I basically asked how would it improve on it, and started asking all these questions that it would then allow for that to really start to go through as an executive summary that we could then use in order to allow different companies to be able to start to understand what we were doing when it came down to banks, when it came down to VCs, when it came down to other aspects like that. So really, really useful, especially from a financial standpoint, because the other thing that, and I'm just trying to find this one, was being able to analyze all of the data. So I took Shopify, we're on Shopify, but you're on Wix, you're on whatever, took all of the sales results and I literally just uploaded it and I said, okay, walk us through what you're finding. It goes back to what Mike was saying. It's really good at understanding trends and patterns. So for it to be able to sit down and start to break down not just the standard things like where are you selling from, but to highlight what are certain, for instance, key customers. Because when you start to upload things like forward sortation areas and Canada Post data, you can start to have it then say, hey, based on Nielsen's Prism data with Canada Post, as well as Canada's demographic info, you can load all this in. How does that measure based on who our customer audience is? And where are you seeing opportunities for customer acquisition? One of the other things that we did, and Mike, maybe you can show this from the sales standpoint. We also had put down where are retailers in the GTA that we should be considering. And it literally did the search and it kicked out a whole list of retailers that we could actually be reaching out to based on this type of information. So
Yeah.
it literally can help in so many areas.
Yeah, it's insane. I'm just going to keep adding to the examples because I think it's important as we work through the stuff with Cavendish. Here's an example where, I'll be honest, we can't afford lifestyle photography. Like who really can? It's quite expensive. So I simply said, and I was using, I believe, Flux to help build this out. And there's lots of different image generators to figure it out. But I said, I need a picture of a woman walking through a North American or a Canadian nature walk, holding a cup of our humility tea, which is a yellow tea. And I just need her to look content. And within seconds, I mean, whether this is the perfect image or whether it might take iterations, it created a beautiful image that I can now use on social media if I wanted to. And if you picture next steps, it would be, hey, can you create a 10-minute or a 10-second animation of this girl walking and taking a sip of her tea? And that's going to be the easy kind of next step. Another image that we did was product placement. We have these products that are great, but again, it's not product photography. We created these products. The product itself wasn't created using AI, just to be clear. We had to Photoshop it because of the nuances of our characters, and we didn't want to misrepresent any of the imaging of the packaging in this case, because the packaging was already designed. So you can do conceptual packaging design with AI, works really, really well. But in applied, I have this package, you need to upload those or create those to make sure that they're 100% accurate with what your product is, because you don't want any, again, hallucinations or misinterpretations. But in this case, I uploaded a few pictures of our packaging and said, hey, I'd love a picture of this on a table with a cup of coffee overlooking a nice view through the windows at a sunset scene. And within seconds, it developed it. It created the color and the light aspect for the coffee. Obviously, created the cup on the right-hand side, all without me having to worry about product photography or angles or any of those things. And I can swap out those backgrounds and different angles as often as I want to. So just an area when you start to think about CPG that can really help is in doing lifestyle photography, but also getting into product photography once you have your product itself.
Mike, Snehal has a question, kind of going back to our video, but I think it could apply to photography as well, or even stock photography. If you were to upload a few clips of whether it's raw video footage or a few ideas around stock photography or stock video, can you leverage AI to help stitch those together in the way you envision?
Yeah, so this is like bleeding edge. Adobe just had their conference, I believe, a couple of days ago, where they're going to be introducing generative AI directly into Premiere and some of their other tools. In this case, you could extend scenes, which is incredible. You can blend scenes. I have examples where it's a beautiful nature shot and a bunch of flowers, and it said, "Hey, I'd love it if a butterfly could fly in here and land on a flower." And the generative AI can create the butterfly and have it kind of jump in and land on the flower. So when I say yes, I mean yes and soon, as these products start to work through. The video has really been the last 6 months of AI that I've been watching. It's definitely getting closer and closer to something that you would want to use in production. Another example was that they had on Adobe Max was a simple one of a hand coming into a scene and flipping a switch. And it was like, oh, I wish I'd actually had them pull the cord. So they asked AI and said, hey, can you switch this up and have the hand come in and pull the cord? I can show you the video clips, but do we have time, Barry? I know we have a lot of content to go through.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay,
Because I
sure.
think people are interested in seeing where this is going too, especially like Sneal, as well as Mike are both asking about a lot of what's happening on the video side. And things happen quickly.
So you can see here, this butterfly is net new. It didn't exist in the video. When it hit that flower and the flower bends, all net new, didn't exist. The flower was there in the original video, but the addition, and you can imagine how long a videographer would have to sit there to hope for the moment of a butterfly landing on a flower. Like that in itself is kind of magical, right? And you can see the hallucinations are really those little edges where you're like, is that real, not real? They're getting really tiny. Like you start to question yourself on what you see and what you don't see. Now, the one on the right is, see if I get it to play. There we go. So the hand comes in. That's the original video shot, was the switch. And what they want to do is say, okay, that was actually a missed shot. We wanted him to go in and pull the cord, which would be expensive to go back, set up the scene. This is AI coming in, pulling the cord based on the same lighting, the same idea, the same glove. And again, this is still relatively early days. Like I said, a lot of this hasn't come out until less than 2 years ago, when you start to think about it. And that was content, then images, and now video. So what I want people to understand is this curve is moving quickly. When I say this is where it's at today, where it's going to be in 6 months, absolutely chilling. Here's an example of Sora, which isn't out yet as far as I can use it anyway. Let me know if you can see this. This is all prompt generated content. So they're literally saying, like I would to GPT, create a video of X using prompts. Create a video of what is that, a bunny? Come in and do a
Kangaroo.
disco dance. Kangaroo? Okay. Yeah, totally. kangaroo. Um, all via prompt. This one is puppies in snow. Like the quality is getting better. The engineering behind it's getting better. Like if you look at the fur and the snow, those are really hard things to do, right? In terms of understanding gravity, weight, texture, all this type of stuff. So when you see the stuff that, and this is about 6 months ago when Sora did the original video demo of this. Again, this scene doesn't exist. It's all made up. It's a prompt. Show me an Amazon river with three birds sitting on a tree. Don't have to think harder. Like these are the prompts that it's using to do this. A petri dish with little pandas. Like you could, like literally your mind becomes your playground. There was a really good one. I can't wait to get this live, where it was like, show me two pirate ships having a battle in a coffee cup, right? And it's incredible. And if I'm like, okay, if it can do that, the amount of things I could do with Cabernet and start to say, hey, what content can we create, or how can I visualize this? Um, Again, creativity is going to go crazy. Video is going to be incredible. But again, that's a person that's not real. That's generated, which starts to get things really odd. Like I've had conversations with AI that aren't obviously people. It's AI that I'm literally talking to for half an hour, and trying to. There's the coffee cup. Like not real. Anyway,
Well, and
so
one of the things that I want to, because I've had a lot of conversations, because so much of my background's been creative from the standpoint of advertising agencies. And on the one hand, you're going to impact certainly the absolute top tier. Um, Granted, are we going to have the evolution of the next Spielberg, the next whomever? Okay, but here's the flip side. How many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and I would say millions upon millions of people who never could have actually activated what they had in their brain that they now actually can activate. How many commercials can we as CPG companies now create as amazing content and start to push that further? And as we get further along, to then have more people like the Randy Diplocks of the world who's on this, who actually understand advertising, understand filmmaking. Well, as they now start to be able to work with those people, and I'd even offer they're going to have a place where when they don't have to deal with all of the rentals of equipment, they don't have to deal with the time, and they're actually just presenting their time and their knowledge and expertise using these tools. I'll bet you they're going to end up making more money than they would have the old-fashioned way. And more people are going to have these opportunities of not just creative expression, but to actually have agency in their lives as founders to be able to realize their dreams at a level that was not conceivable 24 months ago.
all this is infinitely just like insane. Like it it blows my mind. And I know, I wouldn't say a lot, but I know a decent amount enough about AI, and it just blows my mind. But let's bring it back to kind of the tactile and what you guys have been able to do with AI to accelerate Cabanish, just so we can see some tactical examples and how you guys have actually used it versus kind of the theory that we're talking about.
yeah, I think like a good example is some of the photography I was showing. Obviously, affording lifestyle photography is expensive. Product photography is expensive. Again, I used some freelancers to help create the 3D model of my packaging. It's getting there in some of those capabilities, but some things are still better left to be manual. Other areas, things like a lot of the documentation that companies need, roles and responsibilities, policies, terms and conditions, all your website content. Like I kid you not, a good chunk of our content can be created by AI, and some of it was augmented by AI. But I would also say that because of the cultural considerations of Cavendish being an Indigenous-led company, we haven't relied on AI as much for content creation as, let's say, something like what Barry's working on with Auto Agentic, where I'm sure AI is prevalent in creating a lot of that content, only because we don't want to make any mistakes or any hallucinations as it pertains to cultural necessity in a lot of the content that we create. So we have Rai, who's an amazing writer and cultural expert who goes through and helps us with the content and curates it and makes sure that it's appropriate. So I think where a lot of companies could get away with using AI in content creation, and helping to SEO optimize your website, even coming up with simple things. I've used it in the past to do information architecture. I need to do a e-commerce website for this product. What are the pages that I need? And it comes out with a sitemap for me. Amazing. What's the type of content that I would want to showcase on a product? What are the things that would help create conversion rates? Like again, AI can kind of help give you the ideas that you need to say, okay, that's amazing. And then you could even ask it to do an idea of a wireframe, right? To help again get into that design thing a little bit. But there is a lot of experimentation that can be done, a lot of guidance that can be provided. Not 100% that we used it on Cabanish, but definitely areas where I think it could help most CPG companies in terms of content development for sure.
One, I'm going to share, and I'll show you a real example. We were in a situation which was amazing. We got accepted into Summerhill to do demos, which was great. And I've never done a demo before. I literally uploaded, here's all the equipment that we have. Here's what we're doing. And I had it literally create a Cabanish coffee demo standard operating procedure. This took me all of 40 minutes, including me rewriting. Basically created the introduction, let people know what were the equipment and supplies, went down and did a pre-demo preparation. It created the demo day setup, arrive at the store and check in with the manager, arrive at least 1 hour before demo start time, introduce yourself to the demo manager, confirm the designated demo area. Keep in mind, it gave me all of these instructions, okay? Uh, Inventory, all of the stuff it went through, set up the demo area, literally went, here's how you do it, went through and said, here's how you use the coffee brewer. Here's the setup. Here's the brewing process. Here's the amount of time. Here's quality control. Here's then organize the coffee samples. Here's the demo execution. Introduce yourself to staff. Offer full cups. Remember that there are ambassadors for the brand when we aren't there. Make them feel like it. It went through and said, here's all of the ongoing demo management, monitor, refill supplies, etc. Post demo activities, take down instructions. And I also provided background. So it was like also ensure that you have the training. So it provided, here's the company overview. Attached also, how do you say Cabanish? How do you say Kabawik? How do you say Anishinaabe? Because we've got some non-Indigenous people that are part of doing the demos. And then it also described, here's how to describe the coffee blends. So to be able to answer questions and to be able to talk about it. And then it summarized it. Here's the key points to remember: Indigenous heritage, sustainability, cultural storytelling, customer engagement, stay off your phones, safety and hygiene, and then troubleshooting and contact. All I did was I uploaded, here's what we're doing. Here is background information about the company. Can you create SOPs so that way we can provide these to the people doing the demos? All of that I did in, honestly, beginning to end, 45 minutes.
And that's incredible. The one thing I would say when you do those types of larger documents is start a bit small. Say, hey, I need to create a document. What would you suggest as a overview and key chapters or breakdown of like a table of contents type of thing? And then you correct it and say, hey, I think it needs this or do this. Because if you correct it earlier, it's going to have exponential impact on the outcome, right? So if it forgot a chapter that you think might need to be included, or you're not sure about a word, and then be like, okay, give me a quick overview for each section. It will give you an overview, tweak it again, and then be like, okay, now let's go section by section and create the full content. And honestly, I've created 40 to 50 page documentation using AI, but you don't just say, hey, create me a 40-page document on X. You gotta work through it and tweak it as it goes, and then let it start to really fill in the blanks on that type of stuff.
Randy's asking if the dog in the background is real or AI.
Oh my goodness, he's real and super cute. His name's Murphy. He's a Bernedoodle. My kids call him Sir Murphy Von Marshmallow Fluffy Bottom is his full name, and that pretty much explains who he is as a character. He's quite fun. But funny enough, we do have an avatar, Avi, who is a spokesperson for Agentive, who is AI based off a real person. We did a video with her for about half an hour and then used that to create the avatar and create the voice. And now we literally can type scripts into Avi and have her create endless amounts of content. And the other day we did our first test where Avi was actually in the Zoom meeting as a character answering questions and asking questions. So I know the dog was a bit of a joke, but in many ways, not as far off as we'd like to think.
Mike and Barry, you've both talked about having to, you can't just prompt and put your information in and expect for it to come out with a perfect product. That you kind of have to babysit it throughout the journey to ensure that it's on brand, asking and answering the questions that you need, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the other dangers and or things that folks need to be looking out for as they play with AI? Barry, I'll start with
Hallucinations.
you.
Yeah, hallucinations. And then, Shai, I want to do an experiment. I've copied and pasted into chat, like regular chat GPT. We're gonna have chat answer your question, and then Mike and I will jump in because I think that this is part of what we're talking about. But for me, it's there's two arguments that I hear most often, and quite frankly, what I find interesting about adoption in terms of chat. So getting into like some of the problems and concerns. I'm actually finding ironically that it's 45 plus that seem to be embracing AI, which is weird because we were all in our 20s and 30s when the internet came, and we were the generation that led to that. And you think that they would be the ones embracing it, and they're not because they're very focused on the ethics, which is fair, completely fair, not removing that. But the ethics has taken such precedent that they're also not recognizing the utility. And so we have generations right now, two specifically, Gen Z and millennials, who I think are actually going to make themselves irrelevant very quickly because where this is powerful for 45 plus, we all know how to use AI in a manner to be able to get more out of it because we've got the strategic, we've got experience, we have all of these things where they don't. And so one thing is people shifting, and we do need to answer AI, but that needs to be a broader question, and how we're engaging in it does need to be brought forward. And then the second aspect is simply not doing it and not using it is going to cause people to really get behind very quickly because they're not realizing this is a tsunami. I guarantee you what we've just shown you today, most people didn't even think that was at this level. And Mike has shown me things that are going to be coming in 2 months that are going to blow people away. The speed of change right now, if you don't have an open mind, getting caught up in using it, I've said because I saw this, AI is not going to replace any of us, but people who understand how to use AI are absolutely will. So from a personal, professional standpoint and from a competitive standpoint, if we're not utilizing these tools, we will not be able to keep up, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. So we work a lot with Agentive has about 200 freelancers. So all of our agents that I was walking you through, a couple of them, they all have an expert who helped build that agent, who provided workflows, intelligence, expertise, et cetera, to curate it. What's amazing is now those experts use those agents more like a senior or an intern in some cases to help them do more of their great work. So a good example is we had an information architect agent. And if you can imagine, we had to use Google with its 2 million context windows. We were literally uploading Harry Potter book size content to this thing to be like, hey, help us discern this. And we had an expert information architect on the team who had helped build the agent. And what was amazing is the agent was able to build the presentation that was about 40 slides at the end. And it took a lot of back and forth and communication with the agent to ask questions, dive deeper, answer questions, etc. But what we loved was the expert involved spent 20% of the time doing that project that they would have normally. But the 20% that they added was exponentially more valuable and provided better guidance for us than we could have. And the way we like to put it is his cognitive load and capability was focused on his expertise, giving a lot of the work. So if he had done this, we had a very short period of time, about a week. If he had spent the time, it would have been him working 12 to 16 hours a day trying to get this thing out. Instead, he was able to put 16 hours a week that weekend, have the agent do a good chunk of the lifting, and then focus his real strong attention after good night's sleep on the value. Was the agent correct? Should you double check this? Did you check the sources? All the type of stuff to make sure that it was accurate was more of their focus, not writing the content. And even when I work with freelancers that do certain types of things, I'm like, please tell me you're using AI to write your documentation. I don't want you to spend 5 hours writing documentation. I want you to spend 5 hours solving the problem, dictate for a few minutes to the agent, and then let it write the documentation for you, because the value is you doing the thing that you do best, not doing the things you don't, which in this case would be writing documentation.
Well,
Would be a waste of their time.
I'm going to share, but I'm going to echo. I think that, we're all used to hearing, this is allowing us to work on our business, not in it. So I want to take Shai's question, which was, maybe this is a more useful question for the end of the session. There's no question about how powerful AI is, and specifically what you've built with Agentic. It's also very clear that power user can do almost anything with this tech. As many of us are starting at from near zero on AI, love to have some type of guide, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to test out with chat, but then I've also put into a change management. So let's see what it says. So it's thinking. So I'm going to just jump over to chat here. So he's the change management specialist, just because I thought that would be an interesting. So now we'll see what ends up happening here, and then I'll go back to chat. Okay, so that one. And sometimes this happens. Mike, what would you recommend?
You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry, for people using AI and their approach. Um, I would start with, like we were talking earlier, using it as often as you can, and it becoming a habit, because as it becomes a habit, you're going to use it a lot more.
Sorry, Mike, I was just trying to figure out to have AI answer that question before we did.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking my opinion on that question as a third party.
No. So which agent do you think would make sense?
I think Abby would do a good job. She's the generalist. She's top right corner right there, or pinned middle top.
Right here.
Yep.
Yep.
She's a good generalist. She can answer most questions.
All right.
She also does a good dad joke.
There you go. Okay, so AI learning journey. So fundamentals, understand basic AI, learn about the different types of AI models that Mike present at the beginning. Familiarize yourself with AI ethics limitations, tools specific, study agentives or in whatever the other tools are. Practical applications, start with simple tasks and gradually increase complexity. Experiment with different prompts and approaches. Advanced techniques, learn about prompt engineering, understand how to combine multiple AI agents for complex tasks. Beyond tutorial, they apply. While the watch tutorial cycle is useful, a more comprehensive approach might include structured learning, hands-on practice, community engagement, experimentation, feedback loop, agentive versus generic GPT. So it's getting like, but you can just see here how sometimes the best way, and just to kind of loop back to where you were, Mike, ask whatever AI tool that you're using to help you how to get better in AI, and that's your journey.
Yeah. And in doing that, you're going to have what I would call aha moments. And those aha moments they spark people in very different ways. We had a lady that was using AI, and she had like images of spreadsheets, and she was like, I have to enter this data manually. And we said, well, give it a try. And so she uploaded, I think it was 10 images of data, and said, can you create a CSV file? And it did. Right. And don't get me wrong, some things like GPT have plugin limitations on what it can create as files, and maybe it creates a text file that you can copy and paste into Excel. But the point of what Barry's saying, what I'm saying is try it first. When in doubt, ask it the question, is let it kind of guide you through that process. I know one of my biggest things, and we're just going to talk about GPT vanilla because it's the most accessible kind of product that you can get access to. is the first one is going from treating it like Google to treating it like something that you can ask questions to, right? So something that you don't say, hey, what is this? You say, I want to learn this. Give it intention, give it an understanding. That's going to get you a much better answer than just asking a simple question and it'll give you a simple answer. The next is, I need you to act like an expert and then tell it what you needed to act. It's kind of like agent or prompt engineering at like the lowest fidelity, but your answer's still going to get better because all of a sudden, again, it has more context of what you're kind of after and who it needs to be to help answer that question a lot more directly. The next kind of aha moments come into you and how you use it. But trust me, you're gonna have a few moments like me taking a picture of poison ivy and learning it was English ivy, where all of a sudden you're like, huh, there is nothing this can't do. But because I use it every day, I now think of it first rather than going to Google or my other tools. And behavior changing is probably the biggest bump in the road to using AI, is changing your behavior.
I would also add that it could very be a more comfortable entry position for you to leverage AI from a personal perspective versus a business perspective to start. To your point on the English ivy versus the poison ivy, um, I was selling my car on Marketplace and I wanted to be able to stand out in my ad. So my prompts were, here's all of the information about the car, what I'm wanting to sell it for, but give it a bit of a funny, humorous flavor to it. The amount of response I got just to the ad, not that people were wanting to buy the car, but it was phenomenal. But that kind of entry point for me made it a little bit easier for me to understand all of the different types of ways you can talk to and input information into ChatGPT to get what you want. Something very simple that I already understood because I'm in marketing. I was able to, with that knowledge, I was able to train, I'm using that word loosely, ChatGPT to give me what it is that I was looking for versus starting from a business perspective when you don't know what that answer is. Um, but I think really all around, the answer is just do it. Get in there and play with it because the
Yeah.
more you play with it, the easier it's going to become and the more it's going to do for you.
The,
Barry,
the
what
one
about you?
thing that, well, the one thing that I liked about what you just said is, and it correlates, think about your website. You can be now constantly updating your merchandising and your product descriptions. And you literally can be putting in information where you could sit down and you could take, let's say that there's a competitor that you love how, or there's an author that you love how they talk. You literally can say, write my product description for my website so it's SEO optimized and has the greatest level of appeal for our customers based on this style of writing. And boom, you're going to get it. Think of how
Yeah.
long, like just all of those things that you're able to do. It's not just about how can I go and create quick blog content. It's equally how can you actually make the content that you need to work from an SEO standpoint, increase your conversion standpoint. All of those things are very much available at your fingertips right now.
Another good example is I've used it to create blogs, and again, not the writer as we've already discussed, but I know they're writing frameworks. I know that they're writing curves and story curves and arcs and all these things. So I've heard talk of it, and I knew it was a thing. So I went to GPT and I said, "What are the top 7 frameworks for writing really good blogs for conversion?" And it gave me 7 amazing frameworks, and I was like, "Oh wow, I did! Of course this exists because I'm not a writer, but of course it exists." But then I could say, take this content and to Barry's point, write it in a tone of voice of X, but use this framework or tell me which framework you would advise we use to help get a goal of X or the objective of X. So realize that again, the more you can kind of wrap it around, the higher quality you're going to get, but you got to help it to get better, right? Like it could take you a couple more prompts or ask it to ask you more questions like who your target audience is, then say, I don't really know, but help me make a target audience. Okay, great. Copy and paste that into a file, upload it. All of a sudden, like I created content for a 20-page website in a matter of about 3 hours. So first thing I did was I created a tone of voice, then I created content strategy, and I created a few other base documents. And then when I said, okay, based on the content strategy, based on the high level of blog ideas that we have in the tone of voice, and I upload everything, I said, can you start creating two or three blogs for me. But then I didn't have to go through the process of tone of voice every time. I'd created the artifacts I needed, uploaded it as a training document for GPT or any agent would, and then use that, and the quality was instantly 10 times. But I didn't have to do it every time because I created an asset library of business stuff that I could then drag and drop and put in if I knew it would help provide more context.
And
Phenomenal.
well, I know we're getting down the last 5 minutes. Just want to make sure if anybody had any key questions. Hopefully you found this useful. One of the things that we're going to be doing for eQuo, there's two key aspects. One is we're going to be organizing specific CPG agents and doing additional webinars, not just on Agentive, which just as a model is able to do a lot of things at a bit of a deeper level. But also on ChatGPT, and that includes we'll be able to sit down and show you how you can even train your own chat to have your own bot based on your specific brand or your needs as well. So we're going to start uploading a lot more of these. So if this was useful, awesome. If it's not useful, let us know what are other things that you'd like us to focus on. And that includes where eventually we're going to be working between Jen, Mike, and myself. How do we showcase very specific things that we're just going to record, and we're going to start to create a learning center as well, just as an FYI.
Um, as we are about to close, we got about 4 minutes left. I'm going to give you, Barry and Mike, each 1 minute to answer the following question. Where do you see AI taking the CP industry in the next 5 years? Barry, you go.
I think AI is going to take very small brands that are between 250,000 to 5 million, and I think it's actually going to power them to 50 plus million, and that's the less important thing. I think AI is going to give agency to CPG founders who don't have the right networks, don't have the right financing, don't have the right resources, don't have the right connections. And I think it's going to give them true agency on their lives to do what they're passionate about. And it's going to remove a lot of the barriers that get in the way because you don't have those things historically.
Awesome. Mike?
I just want to say ditto to that. You mentioned everything. I would say that when we talk about things like fractional CFOs or fractional CMOs and all these different people that you wish you could have, like if you wanted to build your team of 20, right, to help your CPG company, create those 20 agents or use AI to help you augment those agents or those characters that are going to help you deliver your company, whether it's websites and content creation, social media, images, all the stuff we've walked through today. It's going to let one or a small team of five in the view of Cavenish do what it would take a team of 20. And that's the empowering part of it all, right?
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. As you kind of go along your journey and kind of implement some of the learnings that we've shared with you from today, be sure to let us know what's working for you, and or if you have any questions, you can certainly send us a note at start@equalshift.com and we'll get back to you. Whether I know the answer or Barry does or Mike does, or maybe ChatGPT will help us, or even Agentive. Certainly let us know. Also, we will be posting this recording at least at the maximum by the beginning of next week. It'll be on the learning section of the eQuo website and on our YouTube channel. Please share it out on your socials. We obviously want to continue to grow this group so that we can kind of help more CPG owners as we grow as a community. And any other learnings that you're curious about that we can add to our repertoire of webinars, certainly let us know. Thank you, gentlemen, for all of the insights that you shared, and thank you to the audience for coming today. We look forward to seeing you again soon.